Issue number 2 of the Garden Gazette, Love and Relationships. This is Trouble Believing in Good Relationships, Part 1. Have you believed this? Have you had trouble believing in good relationships? This one's personal. I've been there. It was very painful for me. When I was in that place where I was sort of believing this, it was like a hollow, deep, lonely sadness. So I know that's terrible, but it was very real. And I think some of you relate to that. So in this part, we're going to talk about why this belief is so damaging to you. And we're also going to talk about sometimes how it sneaks up on you and you've actually been believing this, that good relationships aren't possible, and you're actually embodying it without realizing it. We'll talk about that common path that people take to get to that place where there's, that's the overarching idea about relationships, that they're not good, and how that actually prevents you from having good relationships, and how to change that for yourself. In part 2, we're going to talk about like the most common insidious way that this belief repels relationships. And when they do come, it can actually sneak up and destroy the relationship once you get into it. So before I get into that, my name is Iworiosa, and I'm an initiated spiritual guide and oracle. My temple is Moon Garden Temple. And if you're on the path to remembering who you are and living your life to the fullest expression, and also you want to experience awesome relationships, you're in the right place. I'm a certified love attraction coach, and I used to do live workshops before 2020. And during those workshops, I would give people, note cards and say, like, ask me questions and tell me your ideas. And people would send these in or give them to me. And I found this stack from a while back. And it turns out that after going through a lot of these questions, that these are still some of the same questions that come up and same ideas that come up that people are struggling with in their love and relationships in the sessions I have now. And I see it online, people asking these same questions. So they are still relevant. And the question that I pulled out to talk about today is, I have trouble believing that relationships are possible. And I remember when this woman, we talked about this, and she said it's not relationships, it's just like good ones. She didn't believe in good relationships, didn't believe they were possible. So first, I want to share, it might be obvious, maybe it's obvious, I don't know, but I just want to say, if you don't believe it, you will not see it. And I'm sharing this idea because I want you to see the depth of how, when you remember who you are, it changes your experience and your perception. And good relationships are something that are just always a possibility. It's not something that's far, even if you don't have them in front of you right now that you can see and touch, they're just always a possibility. You just know. And so when I'm talking about remembering who you are, if you don't see it, you won't believe it. If you don't believe it, you won't see it. Excuse me. I just want to invite you into an idea. If you've followed me, you've heard me talk about this before, that you have a whole spiritual team. You have all this divine energy. Some of you look at it as energetics or universal energy around you that's there to support you all of the time. And in our ancestral line, somewhere, for every single person watching this, hearing this, somewhere in your ancestral line, you lived as someone who had relationship with your ancestors and spirits and the nature around you, and understood that you were never alone. And when you understood that you were never alone and that you always had support, the desires of your heart, the desires of your spirit were attainable. You didn't live in a whole bunch of doubt and fear. At some point, some colonization came, some civilization came, some controlling, manipulative power came and severed you from embodying that, from believing it, from knowing it. And you started getting into a place where you couldn't see. People started fearing, people started doubting that the desires of their heart were real and that they could achieve them. And that is something that we all suffer from right now. It is easy to have something vulnerable, like I want to connect with somebody in love. I want to put somebody out there, put myself out there. I want to meet somebody and connect and create love. That's a vulnerable position to put yourself in. When you feel alone, when you don't have your spiritual team and divine energy around you, when you when you don't have access to that power around you, it is very easy to start doubting that. It's very easy to self-doubt. It's very easy to listen to society or culture around you that gives you reasons to not believe it. So please put that feather in your cap, or, wherever you want to remember that, is that when you remember who you are and you connect with those divine energies, nature energies, the spirit of ancestor moon and nature, that it changes your perspective about what is possible in all aspects of your life. So I'm always going to come back to that. Remember who you are. So let's talk about why this belief, I don't believe good relationships are possible, are so damaging energetically. So let's acknowledge that most of you, if you're watching my videos, are empaths and sensitives, sisters who give a lot of love, generous spirits, creative, nurturing energy. And let's acknowledge that that energy is so powerful. You are so powerful. So when you wrap that energy around a person or an idea, you give it life. And I know you've seen that. I know you've seen that with people you've been with, or if you're in a community or you're creating something together. When you bring your energy, it lights up whatever that thing is, whatever that creation is, whoever that person is. You're so powerful with what you give. Okay, so when you have an idea that good relationships aren't possible, you are also wrapping your energy around that, and it gives it life. It becomes very, very real. And then you become blinded to the opportunities that are in front of you. And that desire in your heart starts to pale in comparison to this thing that you're attached to, that you're holding on to. It makes sadness, it creates hollowness and loneliness. And so here, I just want to inspire you to just be aware of your own creative power and the energetics around your generous nature. Okay. The other thing I'll say about this is that you're cutting yourself off in a way. If you have desires in your heart desires to connect, to be with somebody, your heart, your spirit wants to walk a path with somebody, create a family maybe, and go on adventures and be in this life with someone, and you are believing that that's not possible. You are really kind of cutting off a possibility and potential within yourself. And I'll go into that a little bit later, or maybe in part 2. So also, I want to say the other reason that this belief is damaging is because you're contributing to your own broken heart. So listen, you've got to feel what you feel. You can't deny what you feel. You get nowhere when you deny what you feel. So if you are experiencing things in your love life like loneliness, if you're experiencing a lot of rejection, or whatever it is, those things are there for a reason. They're indicators, and there's all sorts of ways to work through that. So you got to feel what you feel. Please never ignore what you feel. But if you stay there, if you stay in a feeling, or if you stay in a belief like the one we're talking about, you are programming yourself that your desire is not important. You're rejecting your desire that's very strong to be with somebody. And in some way, you're sort of trying to tell yourself that it's not real, or that basically something that you feel is wrong. And you may have felt those things from another person, right? Being shut down, rejected, saying that how you feel is wrong, unreciprocated love, unreciprocated crushes, right? But if it's self-generated, that heartbreak, when you shut yourself down, when you say your feelings are wrong, right? That feeling, that experience is a bigger heartbreaker than any other breakup or unrequited love experience you could have in your life. And you might not realize that yet. Once you get further away and this whole thing about like not believing in good relationships is a thing of the past, you're going to look back in your experience and see like, breaking my own heart, denying myself, shutting myself down is so much worse than anybody else doing it. So a common reason why we get on the path, and remember in part 2 that, the next video that comes out about this, or the next issue, since this is the Garden Gazette is my virtual newspaper, we'll talk about the insidious way that I see affecting almost all the women I talk to about this very thing. But right now we're going to talk about something that's very common that you're going to definitely relate to, of how we get into this belief system that good relationships are not possible. And that is patterns. patterns. So it's like that thing where you're with somebody, there's love, then they're dismissive, and then you pull back, and then they make a grand gesture and love bomb you, and then the relationship is happening again, and then they take you for granted, and then they ghost, and then you're hurt and you're sad and you get over it and you try again with somebody else, and there's lots of love. They're dismissive of you. You pull back, they make a grand gesture, and then there's love bombing, and the relationship is happening, and they take you for granted, and then they ghost. And it happens over and over again. And not only does it happen over and over again, it happens with somebody who is unlike the next person that you're dating, but the same pattern happened, right? It just keeps going, right? Or it could be something like you keep dating somebody who has the nasty habits of one of your parents. It's like you're dating your parent over and over again. Or it's that thing where it's like you break up, make up, and that person goes and dates your best friends. And then you break up, make up, and that person goes and dates your best friend. And it just keeps happening, right? So it's a crazy maker. These things are crazy makers, these patterns we find ourselves in. And that alone in itself can break our hearts. And you generous spirits out there, okay, you creatives, you empaths, you find yourself, I'm going to say we, because I am you in this, I'm definitely a sensitive, generous spirit, lots of love to give. We find ourselves oftentimes in relationships, in relationships with people who are dysfunctional, lacking interpersonal skills, manipulators, narcissism takers. Okay, again, very true for me. There was a whole era of my life that was like that. One of the things that we tend to go to, and also sometimes we get educated into, is when we're stuck in these patterns, we look for fault in ourselves, right? Especially if you're from kind of I'm 41. So there's this whole era where when this was kind of a big part of my life, I was always told your vibe attracts your tribe. You're attracting this, and I got into this way of, because these patterns were so strong, I got into this way of thinking, why am I attracting this? Why am I attracting this? Which is not a bad question to ask yourself. It's a good exploration, but it really led me to believing that there was something wrong with me. And if you're in the patterns long enough, and the results are consistently pain and suffering, conflict, and just crappy stuff, that results in you thinking that you did something wrong, or the world is against you, or you're cursed, or even if you start to hate or fear a group of people that you are normally interested in, like to date or have experiences with, there's no wonder that you might believe that good relationships are not possible. I certainly started believing that in different parts of that era of my life. So what do we do about the patterns so that we don't stay attached to this thought that good relationships are not possible, and it ends up hurting our hearts and breaking our own hearts and eventually preventing us from actually having good relationships? So, okay, first a side note, if you find yourself crushing and dating and experiencing people that are manipulative, narcissists, takers, those who feed off your light, please know that those people are not looking for you. They're you are inherently not doing anything wrong, okay? They are looking for anyone who is generous and nurturing and has good energy, so they can feed off of it, okay? And if this is the first time you're hearing this, it is my greatest pleasure to share this info with you. It really lights my heart up. It's not your fault. You didn't ask for it. But now that you know about it, you probably can take responsibility for changing it, be more aware, understanding that your love is a gift and your care is a gift, and you have to have good boundaries to protect it. It's vital for your happiness, okay? So there are routes to take to changing these patterns so you can start to believe in the possibility of good relationships again. And some of this stuff goes really, really deep. So I do suggest working with like a guide like myself, a coach, a therapist. And if you haven't already, seek working with your spiritual team, your divine family, the moon, the river, earth, the wind, right? Also your ancestors who are around you, maybe the fairies, maybe the little people. There's cleaning rituals and unbinding ceremonies. All of these are important. You have so much access to how you can get help around ending some of these patterns. So for now, one way to release yourself from this pattern is to ask yourself, and I want to say what I'm going to share with you about, releasing yourself from these patterns and changing it. These are good starts, and it can take you really far. It might not be the only way. There might be other supports, like I just mentioned, but these really can change the pattern depending on your sincerity and your consistency and your willingness to be open about where these questions will take you. So instead of asking, why do I attract this pattern? Ask, am I attracted to this pattern? Is there any part of me in this that feels comfort? Is this pattern giving me comfort? Is this pattern giving me something that I need? Sometimes just asking those questions alone can like free something in you that's just like, oh, like, no, I'm not attracted to this. I don't need this. There's nothing in it that's helping me. Sometimes that's what it is. And sometimes it brings up other things, some things about our past, some things that we're just maybe not aware of. I did have a client who, when we started together, she came telling me that she discovered that she felt love. She was able to open up and find love, and who she was attracted to were men who were slightly predatory and controlling, because she discovered because her father had been that way. And even though she wasn't able to, even though she left his house at a young age and lived with her mom, it still affected her. Like, she was only in his house for like 3 years of her life, but it was impactful enough that that's how it affected her relationship life. And when she found out that the people that she was dating were the same way, she knew enough to know that it wasn't okay for her, but she just kept rewriting the story in her mind when her partners were abusive so she could stay in those relationships, because that's what she was used to, and that's what she experienced of love from a man. And that's not exclusive to men. That can also happen with mothers and, just people you grow up with. So she was in that pattern with men for decades before she started to do some of the explorations and seeking help. And when I met her, she did not believe that good relationships were a possibility. And I can tell you that now she is happily married with kids, which she didn't even know she wanted. Okay. So also, she's a cycle breaker. And I think that if you're watching this video, if you're following me at all, you're probably a cycle breaker, because some of these patterns, yeah, maybe you're experiencing them in your life, but I bet they also exist somewhere else in your family. So the fact that you even want to change this, you're acknowledging that maybe you feel this way and you want to change the pattern, that's already doing some cycle breaking. So congratulations, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so you're going to ask, am I attracted to this pattern? And is there any part of me that wants this pattern, wants this pattern or feels comfort in it? And explore it, list it out, get familiar with why you keep coming back, or why you are staying in the pattern. Other things are going to come up. I highly suggest you do this work under the full moon, the moon magic. Okay, I could go on a whole tangent about that, but the thing about the full moon is it's a time that light is being shed on the darkness. And this is, you're going to want to be really real in your answers, even if they're embarrassing or ugly. Healing is not pretty. This is part of healing, and we go into the darkness to find the light. So under the full moon is such a great time to do this, because that ancestor moon is helping us let go of what we don't need. Okay, so it's a magic of the moon, a power of the moon that's here to help us expel what is not working with us. Anytime you're trying to break a pattern and you're starting to work around and you're starting to work with it, engage with it so it can go, the full moon is the best time to do that. So also ask yourself, what am I attracting to any relationship, what am I attracted to in any relationship that's healthy and nourishing to me? And that can be friends and family and coworkers and community. What works for you? What inspires you? What feels good in your connections? And when you identify those things, express gratitude for the experience. Wrap your energy around appreciating the experience. Remember how powerful you are. Your gratitude and your appreciation and your love is so powerful. Start recognizing those things that are in your life right now, in any relationships that are nourishing, that are good for you. You're helping your heart remember that these things are good connections, that are real, and that they're with other people, and they're actually happening to you. Let your heart really feel that. Your brain will follow along, but you really got to juice up what's happening here in your heart and your spirit. And again, these sound like simple little practices, but depending on your sincerity and your consistency and your willingness to believe and be open that they can help you, you will see a change. You can rebalance that connection to your heart, like I said, and you can break free of the old patterns. And I can say that I've done it. And I see it all the time. I work with women who do this all the time. But listen, my friends, don't put a time limit on it. Just be sincere, open, consistent, and have the courage to walk this path of healing. And when you do this, there will be other things that will show up, like other healing factors, like you'll experience like other attachment. You'll start to be aware of other things that are contributing to your attachment to this belief system that relationships aren't real. All of a sudden you'll start being so aware of those, and then you can start allowing those to fall away. You will start to see crappy patterns show up in your life, and before you get too bonded or too deeply into them or go too far, you'll step back. You might not the first time. You might still make the same mistake and go, oh, I knew it. I've been working around this. I know this isn't good for me. You might still do it. But over time, if you're consistent and you're sincere, little by little, they just won't be part of your life anymore. The patterns will fall away. All right. We say fall away, but really it's work. You know, you do work, it's a lot of work, and then all of a sudden they can't attach anymore. So you might end up finding a book that you never would have noticed before that will help you move on. You're going to hear wisdom that changes your whole outlook, your whole paradigm on love and relationships. And maybe you'll find the inspiration to work with someone who can help you. Right. So, also, new people will show up on your path. That's something that happens a lot. I notice when people start to question and sort of deconstruct and look for ways to unbind themselves from patterns and old belief systems, is just all of a sudden the people around you who may have supported the old way might fall away, and then new people are going to show up. And it really is just about your willingness to dedicate yourself to yourself. And before you know it, there's not going to be trouble in believing that relationships can be really good. It's just, it won't even be something you'll need to believe because it's just going to be happening. So there's so much more to talk about this specific thing. We're going to talk about it all in part 2 in having trouble believing good relationships. And in part 2, we're going to talk about the most insidious way we start to believe this and how it can destroy our possibilities of relationships, but how if we don't really understand and engage with this to heal it, it can really be destructive in relationships when they do come, when we find ourselves in relationships or possibilities of relationships in front of us. And almost every woman I've worked with on these subjects experiences what we're going to talk about in part 2. And once they're free of it, love always follows. I mean, it just does. So especially for you, so everybody, please come and watch part 2, but especially if you feel like you have kind of just given up on this, but you still feel that little part inside you that's just like, but I do want to experience love, and I do want to make plans with somebody, and it is in there. And even if it makes you feel sad that you want that, if you have any part of you that's like, I want this possibility, please come watch part 2. It's going to come out in the Garden Gazette. Look around this video or wherever you're seeing this for how to subscribe to the Garden Gazette. I am not going to put the second video out in public, so you do need to subscribe to see that video. If you can't find the link, just go to my website, Moon Garden Temple, to subscribe there. And thank you for listening and joining me on this little journey. And this is the first video I've ever made for the Garden Gazette. So I feel really proud of it, and I'm really glad to be connecting with you in this way. So thank you again. My name is Iworiosa. Blessings.